Hello. Today I'm going to be demonstrating one of the new project templates available in Simple GIS Client. That project template is called the Site Analysis Project Template, and essentially what it does is allow the user to identify potential sites, whether it's for some type of construction or new business, based upon a variety of factors using a multi-layer buffer analysis. And hopefully that'll become more clear as we step through this demo. To begin with, I've launched the Simple GIS Client application and I've gone to the new project screen. So this button here in the upper left corner of the application window, as you click on that, you'll get a screen that presents several of the project templates. Again, these are just kind of helpers or starting off points to help you get started with a new project. And of course, as you create a project, you can continue to reopen and use that same project without having to go through this startup guide again. But in this case, we're going to start, and the template I'm going to be discussing today is this last one in the list called the Site Analysis Project. If I double click on this tile, it's going to create a new project and bring you to this dialog box. So much like many of the project templates, the very first step is to just give a name to your project. So I'm just going to call this one my site analysis. And the way this template works, it uses data from the Street Atlas data sets that you can download with Simple GIS Client. These are detailed data sets that have a lot of features like roadways, waterways, points of interest, and a lot of different features within those data sets. And so it uses that as a set of infrastructure layers that you can use to help perform your site analysis. Now, you can add your own data as well. You're not limited to that. But by default, that's what it's going to use. So one of the things you're going to notice on this button here is, as far as proceeding to the next step, is to select the Street Atlas map and data to add to our map. So as I click on this button, I'm going to get a list of U.S. states. And so I would just click the state for which I'm going to be performing the analysis within. I can select multiple states or I can select a single state. As you see these check boxes, you just basically check the state that you're interested in performing the analysis on. And then the next thing you're going to do is click this next button to set our analysis parameters. At that point, as I click that button, it'll search and see if you've already downloaded the data set for the state selected. And if it can't find a matching data set, it'll go ahead and begin the download process to download that data to your local machine. So as I click this button, in this case, I've already downloaded the entire US data set, so it recognizes that, and I don't have to re-download any other data sets. So at this point, I'm presenting with this dialog, and right now it's just an empty table, but this is where I'm going to start adding conditions for my analysis. So in this example, let's assume that we're wanting to find potential sites located around interstate interchanges within a given radius of a population center, so like cities and towns. And so one way you could do that is I could come to this next button that says Add Site Condition. Again, as I click on this, I get a new dialog that appears, and then I have a list of features here that I can choose from. Or I have a button here that I can click to add my own layers into the map if I've already added those layers into my map. But in this case, I'm just going to use these layers that come with the Street Atlas data set. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start selecting some different population centers. So I'm going to click the cities, towns option here at the end of the list. And then I want to limit the population ranges I want to consider. Or maybe I want to change the radius around the population centers based upon the population of the city. So for instance, let's say I wanted to look at cities with a population greater than 1 million. And let's just put some large number here. I think this would be like 20 million in this case. So let me make sure I got the right number of zeros here. It looks like one too many. That's right. My eyes are playing tricks on me. And now we can specify a distance around the city location that we want to consider. So let's say for a really large city like this, I want to consider anything within a 10-mile radius. So again, I'm going to have my unit set to miles, which is indicated by this radio button. And of course, I can change that. And whatever I have selected on this radio button, that's how it's going to interpret the distance that's been entered. And then the condition operation for the very first condition, it doesn't matter what you select here. So let's just click apply, and then we'll explain this as we add some additional conditions. So I'm going to apply this condition. And I can see this is the feature. Here's the filter I'm going to use, and the distance I want to consider. So I'm going to add a new condition now. And let's do the same thing. I'm going to select city and towns, but this time let's consider anything with a population of 500,000 up to, since we started the previous condition at 1 million, so we'll put this in at 999,999. And in this case, for cities with this type of population, I only want to consider anything within 7 miles of the city. So again, I enter in my distance. I have to leave my units of measurement and leave it set to miles. Now for the condition operation, what I want to do now is select R. And so what this means is it wants to consider, as I apply this condition and I look at these two conditions, it's saying I want to look at all locations within a radius of 10 miles from cities with a population greater than 1 million, or any cities with a population greater than 500,000 and less than 1 million within 7 miles, a 7-mile radius. And so I can continue to add that. So I can do another city. Let's just do one more. And this one will do 100,000 up to 500,000, 499,999. And this one will say let's do a 3-mile radius. And again, we're going to do an R condition and apply. So now what I've built is I want to generate and look at all locations within 10 miles of cities with a population greater than 1 million, or within 7 miles of cities with a population greater than 500,000 but less than 1 million, or 3 miles for cities with a population greater than 100,000 and less than 500,000. And now I'm going to add one more site condition. And for this one, I'm going to select motorways, freeways, which is typically your interstates. It's your limited access divided interstates, freeways. And as I select that, there's one other checkbox I want to check. I want to say consider only interchanges. If I don't check this, it's just going to look around any linear motorway, freeway feature within a given radius. But if I wanted to limit it to specific to interchanges, I would need to check this box. If I wanted to consider any potential sites anywhere along the linear feature, I would just leave this unchecked. So I'm going to leave it checked. And again, now I'm going to specify a distance for this. So let's say I only want to look at locations within 1/10 of a mile of the interchange. And for this condition, I want it to be an and. And the reason I'm doing that is I apply this condition. If you look at what I've built here, I'm looking at all locations within these various radial distances between the cities at various populations. So any locations that meet any of these conditions. And then I'm going to merge it with any locations within 1/10 of a mile of an interstate interchange. And so it's only going to do an intersection then between these potential locations around the cities with the radial distance of 1/10 of a mile around the interchanges. Now, the final step I want to do is I can do some other features here, and I'll just call your attention to a few more of these buttons. So one is if there was other data I had in shapefile or other type of GIS formats I wanted to add to my map, I could click this, select additional data to my map, and then I could use that to add additional site conditions using that data I've added to my map. And then the other thing, and I'll demonstrate that here quickly, is I can perform additional analysis using either using to calculate census demographic data based upon the potential site locations, or I can do some other spatial analysis as well, which I'll demonstrate here. So if I click this actual button that I have highlighted, I get a new screen, and it has a couple of tabs. One is include demographic data, where I can select certain demographic data if I want it to calculate, for instance, a population with a potential site. Or the other thing I can do is some other spatial analysis, which I'm demonstrating in this video. So if I click on the perform spatial analysis, for this example, let's say I want it to locate. So one of the features in the Street Atlas data set is a points of interest, which is just a simple point feature data set that represents, for instance, hotels or restaurants, medical services like hospitals, pharmacies, schools, etc. So let's say I wanted to select all features from points of interest that are completely contained within, so that's the spatial operation, that are completely contained within the evaluated sites. And then I want to group this data by POI type. So in this particular case, on this layer, on the points of interest layer, there's a field called POI type that essentially indicates a type of feature that the point is, whether it's a restaurant feature or hotel, school, etc. Excuse me. So if I wanted to classify the data by that type, so I'm going to group it by the POI type. And then what I can do is summarize the data. And so what I can do is select this POI type. There's really only two fields in this particular layer, name and POI type. But if I wanted to get a count of the number of features within the potential identified sites classified by the POI type, I can select this field, and for the field operation, I'm just going to do a count. I can enter a new name for my field. And then finally, I just need there's this button with the double arrows pointing to the right to add this as an output field. And so as I click this button, you'll see it gets placed here at the bottom under the output fields. So this is going to be the name of the new field that I entered in this text box, count of POI. This is the operation that it's performing, and this is the attribute field in the layer we chose that is going to perform that operation on. And then I'm just left with a final step, which is to specify the output of my new layer that will hold, hold the results. And I'm just going to give it a simple name, and then I'll click Start Analysis. At this point, it's going to conduct its analysis. You'll get a status indication at the bottom of the dialog here, just kind of let you know the step that it's going through. So since we have selected that we wanted to perform the analysis on the state of Georgia, it's selecting all potential interchanges within the state of Georgia. And it's going to go through and do the same thing for the cities, create the buffers around those population centers on the various radiuses. And then it's going to go through and do the same thing for the interchanges, and then it's going to merge all this data together. And then finally, it's going to summarize the data based upon the points of interest that we selected. And once it gets through with all this, it's going to generate this layer and add it to your map and present the results. So currently I see that it's in the process of merging. Now it's actually summarizing the data on the points of interest. And now it's identified the potential sites and it's added this layer to the map. I can see here. And it also gives me a graph of the results of the data that we used for the spatial analysis here. Now, this is a little hard to see because there's a lot of potential sites that's been identified. And they are a little hard to see at this scale. I see I have some up here, of course, around Atlanta. Here's some more here towards the center of the state as well. And if I was to zoom in on some of these, they would become more clear. So here we are around Macon, and we can see potential site locations that met the criteria within the given radius of the city and within that given radius of the interchange. And of course, some of these run together because of interchanges being within close proximity of each other. And as I zoom in, I see my graph update as well, because here I have the option on my graph to select to display results for only the visible features, or I could select to only view the results for selected features or for all features. So for example, if I clicked on all features, of course, it tries to show all potential sites, which it becomes very cluttered. I could do selected as well, which is currently not showing any, and that's simply because we haven't selected any. If I was to select one of these potential sites using my select feature tools, the way I would do that is make sure my site analysis result shapefile is the active layer, which it currently is, as I can see by the highlighted color. If you notice, as I click on a layer, it changes its highlighted color. And if I use the select feature tool and click on one of these features to select it, then it would give me the results. And it just so happens the feature I selected has no features that met that criteria. So no points of interest on those different categories. I can select this feature and I can see I get different results here. So there's 2 hotels, looks like 1 food or restaurant type points of interest, and then that's it. Of course, I'm sure this one, it's a bigger area and probably has several more features. Not too much. So as I click on it, I see it's actually just 3 and then a school. And so that's kind of how you could use that. Or again, I could go back to the visible to show whatever I'm zoomed in, whatever is in the current display, it would show on this particular screen. So each site. And so that's the site analysis. I can come up to some of the larger areas here. Of course, I see there's many more here around Atlanta. A lot of other potential sites that met the criteria for that. And of course, I see a lot of sites here that has a lot more features, points of interest around it. So this particular one is 16 hotels. And of course, if I click on one of these bars, it'll actually flash also the potential site that represents that particular bar graphic. Hopefully this has been of help. As always, you can visit our website at simplegissoftware.com. That's all one word, simplegissoftware.com. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions. Excuse me. There is a contact us page on the website that you can leave us a message. And we'd be happy to respond to any questions you might have. Thank you.